She thought it was nothing. A small act of kindness on a quiet morning. Just a nurse, tired from a night shift, handing a stranger a few dollars at the gas pump. But that stranger wore the colors of one of the most feared biker gangs in America. Within hours, whispers turned to engines, and the sound of steel and leather filled her street. What happened next wasn't just about gratitude. It would challenge everything. She thought she knew about fear, respect, and what it means to stand out because of the color of your skin. Angela Johnson's life was built on routine. At 34, she had spent more than a decade as a nurse, working long nights at the hospital and coming home to a modest, tree-lined street, where the loudest noise was, usually a lawnmower or kids riding bikes. She took pride in her work, in helping strangers without asking for anything in return. But being a black woman in America meant she was no stranger to judgment. She'd felt the stares, heard the whispers, and learned to carry herself with quiet strength. That morning was like any other after a grueling shift. The air was cool, the sun just beginning to warm the horizon, and Angela stopped at her favorite little gas station before heading home. It was the kind of place where everyone seemed to know each other, a pocket of familiarity in a world that often felt unkind. She didn't know it yet, but that stop would put her face to face with a man from a world she'd only seen in headlines, a world that carried both danger and unexpected truths. By the time she left, the day still felt ordinary, but somewhere far from her quiet street, engines were starting and her name was being remembered. Angela barely thought about the biker after leaving the gas station. She'd done what she always did, helped someone in need, but by that afternoon something felt different. It started with the sound of a motorcycle rolling slowly past her street. She caught it from the corner of her eye, a black Harley crawling by, the rider's gaze sweeping over the houses. It wasn't unusual to see bikes on weekends, but the way he slowed, the way his head turned, it made her stomach tighten. At the grocery store later that day, she noticed another biker leaning against his motorcycle in the parking lot. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just watched her, eyes following her every step until she drove away. It felt less like curiosity, more like surveillance. By the time she pulled onto her street that evening, headlights appeared in her rearview mirror, too close, too steady. The rider stayed behind her for 3 blocks, then suddenly peeled away without warning. Angela brushed it off as coincidence, but deep down a quiet unease began to grow. That night, as she sipped coffee on her porch, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She ignored it. A minute later it rang again. This time she answered, only to be met with silence. Then faintly she heard it, the low, rolling growl of multiple motorcycle engines. The call ended abruptly. Angela locked her doors. Being a black woman alone in her home, the thought of strangers, especially men tied to a gang with a dangerous reputation, brought memories she'd tried to bury. Times when she'd been followed in stores for no reason. Times when police had questioned her in her own neighborhood. She'd learned long ago that sometimes being visible was the same as being a target. But this felt different, more deliberate. The next morning the tension didn't fade, it escalated. At sunrise the faint rumble returned. Louder this time. She peeked through her curtains. 1 bike, then 3, then 10, gliding into her street like a slow-moving storm. They lined up along the curb, chrome glinting, leather jackets marked with the same notorious patch. No one spoke. No one smiled. They just waited. Angela's heart pounded as boots hit the pavement, their steps echoing on the asphalt. Dozens of them now, shoulder to shoulder, eyes fixed on her house. She didn't know if she was about to be threatened or worse. Then came the knock. Heavy, measured, 3 deliberate pounds. That rattled her doorframe. Her body froze. Every survival instinct told her not to move. But with each second of silence, the pressure built, until she found herself walking to the door. Her hand trembled on the latch. She opened it just a crack, enough to see the man from the gas station standing there, his shadow spilling across her porch. Behind him the others stood in perfect formation, engines idling like restless beasts. He reached into his jacket. Angela's pulse hammered. Was this where kindness had led her? To a moment she might not survive? Angela's breath came shallow, her fingers tightening around the edge of the door. The man from the gas station stood still, his face unreadable beneath the shadow of his helmet. Around him a wall of bikers filled the street, thick leather jackets, steel chains glinting, eyes locked on her. He reached deeper into his jacket and time seemed to slow. Every story she'd ever heard about the Hells Angels flashed through her mind. Violence, retaliation, the kind of headlines that didn't end well for people who looked like her. She felt that old, familiar fear, rooted in every time she'd been judged before she spoke, every time her skin had been the first thing people saw. Was this the moment she became another statistic? Another woman whose kindness went unremembered, replaced by a tragedy whispered about in news reports? The man stepped forward, closing the gap between them. She wanted to slam the door to hide, but her legs refused to move. From the corner of her eye, she saw a neighbor's curtain twitch. Someone was watching, but no one was coming to help. Then his hand emerged, not holding a weapon, but a small folded envelope. He placed it gently into her palm, the paper warm from his pocket. She could feel the weight immediately, far heavier than the few bills she had given him. "You didn't have to do what you did," he said, voice steady, eyes sharp. "But you did. That means something to us." Before she could respond, he turned sharply. The others followed without a word, mounting their bikes in perfect unison. Engines roared to life, shaking the air. One by one they pulled away, disappearing into the dark, leaving Angela standing frozen in her doorway. She looked down at the envelope, her hands trembling. Whatever was inside wasn't just money, it was a message. But was it one of gratitude, or a promise she didn't yet understand? Angela stood there for a long time after the last engine faded into the distance. The quiet felt almost unnatural, pressing against her ears after the storm of sound and presence that had filled her street. She closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it, the envelope still clutched in her hand. When she finally opened it, she found a wad of bills, far more than she'd given. But it wasn't the money that shook her. It was what it represented. A gesture from a group the world had told her to fear. A reminder that people can surprise you, but also a warning. When your life brushes against worlds you don't understand, the impact can echo in ways you never expect. Angela knew the night had shifted something inside her. She'd spent her life walking the line between kindness and caution, between being visible and staying safe. That line was sharper for her than for many, carved by a lifetime of knowing her skin color changed, the way people saw her before she even spoke. This encounter didn't erase that truth, it made it clearer. She thought about how easily this story could have gone another way. If she had been a different color, if they had been in a different neighborhood, if the moment at the gas station had been misread. Those questions didn't fade, they lingered like the smell of gasoline on her hands. Angela would never forget that day, not because of the money, not even because of the bikers, but because it reminded her, and should remind all of us, that kindness is powerful, but it doesn't erase the weight of history. The world will tell you to be afraid of what's different, but maybe the real danger is never daring to challenge that fear. If you've ever faced a moment that changed how you see someone you love, share your story in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful tales that touch the heart. Thank you for being here.